Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Hit Reviews, with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be covering a title which has been gifted to me by Ranok, namely Subset Game Strategic Space Simulation, FTL. Find out if I was having fun blasting off at the speed of light, or if I surrendered because I wasn't prepared to fight. Basically, you're the galaxy's last hope, ferrying top secret blueprints? Information? Something that makes you pivotal towards saving the Galactic Federation from collapsing beneath the onslaught of the rebel forces. So it's sort of like Star Wars, I guess, but backwards. So yeah, anyways, it's the rebels that are evil and probably a bit xenophobic in this. So I guess you're mostly spared the Star Wars analogy. Now go forth and somehow dodge the ensuing armada and take on their flagship in solitary combat. For reasons. On a serious note, whilst the actual beginning of the game doesn't really provide the most context, I actually grew somewhat invested in the universe it provides, given that FTL has a number of miniature scenarios that crop up as you navigate the various systems, which not only provide gameplay benefits, but a fair amount of flavor towards the various species and factions in the game and fleshing it out. That said, I have yet to actually beat the flagship, so I can't really commentate on how elaborate the ending is until I actually manage to kill that bastard. One day. One day. Fuck your three forms. Anyways, that said, I haven't really needed to beat the game to invest a fair amount of time in FTL, and that's because there's a lot to do in this particular spaceship-oriented roguelike simulation that is a mouthful. More or less, the game puts you in charge of a spacecraft and a handful of crew members who need to navigate a number of space sectors in order to reach the Federation's holdout. The simulation aspect of the game comes out in a number of facets, such as mapping out the most efficient path towards the end of the various systems, ensuring that you don't run out of fuel, nor allowing the ship to fall into disrepair, all while fending off enemies, environmental hazards, and the gradual encroachment of the rebel fleet, also not feeding your crew to giant spiders. Moreover, you also need to keep a very close eye on your crew, which represent an integral aspect of your ship, both for the sake of its basic operation, as well as increasing the efficacy of things like its firepower, shields, or piloting. But, you know, it is very much a roguelike, and as such, as much as you can plan and act with a distinct sense of purpose, as you navigate the star map, you'll encounter a number of randomized encounters, such as stumbling into plague-contaminated pirates, derelict ships in need of exploration, or a boarding party that happens to think it would be really clever to shut down your ship and board you while you're parked near a sun. You know, or just members of other species looking to pillage, parlay, and purvey fine goods. Which, you know, doesn't just include weapons by the by, as you can get some nifty things such as additional subsystems like flipping cloaking devices for your ship, or passives, like increased fire rate. And, you know, slavery is alive and well in the far future. It is not my fault I keep shooting up slaver ships, okay? I feel mildly bad when they don't surrender, but it's such a good way to get crew when they surrender to you. Just, if they don't, it's a tragic loss of life because I refuse to buy slaves. And instead just kill them by extension. Anyways, still, while some bits of, misfortune are more difficult to avoid than others, seriously, screw you boarding parties, the game does offer the player with a number of different means of tackling its various challenges, both amongst its default options, as well as more elaborate options which it provides in blue text, based on either the presence of certain species or just certain chunks of equipment you have, or upgraded systems. Whilst the text in white can be a bit of a gamble, with some of the outcomes being as severe as the abrupt loss of a random crew member you've taken the time to advance because they've been stabbed to death by, like, space goats, the blue options are favorable towards your people and tend to reward you for diversifying your crew and ship. And you're going to likely benefit from diversifying your ship, as the game's hazards and combats rapidly ramp up in challenge, and you can't always count on the shops you sporadically bump into to provide you the gear you're holding out for, requiring you to adjust your overall strategy as you progress and enemies grow more difficult. I repeat, screw you, final boss, and your three forms! That said, even if you do perish, all isn't lost. I mean, yeah, your ship certainly is, as is all the progress you made directly on your journey, But there's means of unlocking alternate ships in the game, both variants from the beginning ship that you have, as well as other ships entirely, which are essentially associated with each of the species that can be found on the game. Now, to acquire these other ships, the player is generally required to beat the game with the ship which preceded it. But alternatively, if they're able to find a quest associated with that ship in the game, and follow through with it to completion, they'll acquire a nifty reward and unlock the newfound ship to use. Which also provides different beginning crews and allows you to play around with the different manners in which the other species affect the ships themselves. I personally adore the Zoltans and their ability to power up ship systems like living batteries. Oh yes. And hey, if you manage to adequately do well with the ships by unlocking achievements, you'll gain variant versions of the ships which provide very different ways to play the cruisers and change up their starting kits noticeably. And honestly, that changing kits is nice, given it allows you to change how you tackle the game even after you lose time and time again. Because it's hard. Easy makes it far less difficult, but you can still expect the end of the game to do you some serious harm, because there's a lot of things to micromanage. Whilst I haven't talked much about the combat, it can be fairly brutal, as despite the real-time but able to be paused aspect of it, things can still go horribly wrong horribly fast. Nothing says, "Welcome to die, X-Men," like a missile casually sailing through your shields, like right there, knocking out most of your shield generator in one hit, and then starting a fire in a room full of crew, before another missile then goes flying into your hull and breaches it and begins to vent the oxygen from your ship. You know, while said ship is also charging up burst shots to pepper your hull into Swiss cheese. And this is in fact amplified in the advanced edition of FTL, which adds the option of, you know, adding new options into the game. You can activate or deactivate this feature, which adds new species, ship types, and variants of the game, as well as hacking, which can cut both ways. See, whilst I have used hacking to great effect to make some encounters easier, I've also had the misfortune of having my door systems hacked, so no one could actually leave rooms they were in, while the rooms were simultaneously on fire, and my oxygen systems for the ship were shut down, so everyone was slowly suffocating. It was really bad. So, you know, the sheer level of helplessness and despair I felt was, you know, it was definitely fitting of a last boss screw you ×3 combo at least. Anyways, I really dig the music in FTL. It's pretty mellow to listen to, even if I do sometimes get distracted by the distressing sound of my ship getting set on fire and the oxygen venting out and my crew dying again. Yes, I know that's a very specific example, but yeah, you know, very spiffy music. Much good. Now, in the visual department, FTL isn't the most complicated of beasts, but what is offered is appealing to see, and always fairly straightforward to parse. And there is a fair number of things to keep track of. Because, my god, have I forgotten to turn on oxygen a few times after power has been knocked out. So, having the readily noticeable indicators and reinforcement of things like oxygen levels in a given room is really nice. Simplicity and presentability is definitely a boon here. You know, this brings us to the finale of this particular episode, and I gotta say, it was an interesting ride. The gradual manner in which I built my understanding of how the ships worked, and what would be most beneficial to me for the sake of opening up the most favorable outcomes to the various encounters, did gradually make the game sting less. Like, I can get to the boss on normal fairly consistently, and then die, but I suppose that was the thing. As much as the complexity of the game and learning about the races and the ships and the quests has a distinct appeal to me, it was definitely more about the journey than the end, as I found myself dreading the tail end of most of my runs. FTL is a bit further from my cup of tea than most games, especially given how unforgiving it can feel, which placed it a bit more towards the fumble side of things, but I can certainly appreciate its various systems and world building. I just know that I personally found myself frustrated by my experience with it more often than not. That said, if you relish challenge, are an avid fan of space, and have a fondness for the sort of brutality that can be found in a more traditional roguelike, and just dig simulations, this may in fact tickle your fancy. Anyways, that's a wrap, so I'd like to thank you folks for both tuning in and sticking till the end. Whether you agree or disagree with my thoughts, I'd love to hear from you folks in the comments, and for those interested in more indie reviews or interviews with developers, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified when we have a new release. There's also our Ko-fi if you'd like to support us, and our editor Shrimp, which you can also reach by finding a link in our description and in the banner, just like our Discord. Link description and the banner, and then you can become a part of our community, which is ever so cozy. Anywho, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.